finish this chapter. So everything in this chapter is all related together. So we're talking about place value in every single one of these lessons. Sometimes we talked about place values through the millions place, remember, all the way up to the 100 millions. And then last week, towards the end of the week, we got into decimals. So we talked about the tenths, the hundredths, the thousandths. We're going to continue with more thousandth stuff for today. So our essential question is the same, like I said. It's how does the position of a digit in a number relate to its value? So you can tell how much the digit is worth based on where it lands in the number. So if it's in the tens place, if there's a 5 in the tens place, it's going to be worth a different amount than a 5 that's in the millions place. Okay, so the value of a number changes based on its position in the place value chart. Okay, so on your whiteboard, here's your problem of the day for your whiteboard. It says, what number is 1,101 more than 1,100,001? Write your answer in standard form and word form. So you actually are going to have two answers on your whiteboard. One is going to be standard form, which remember is just numbers and digits. And the second answer will be written out in words. So you might need a couple of minutes to try this one. So 1,101 more than 1,100,001. So this is the key word that tells me what I'm doing. What am I going to do? Which operation will I use on this problem? Which operation will I use? Operation means addition, multiplication, division. Bryson, what is it?
Addition.
Addition. So because it says more than, it means I'm going to add those numbers together. So I'm going to add 1,101 and 1,100,001. So take a second by yourself, then we'll share it with our group. Okay, as you spoke to your partner, hopefully here's what you came up with. We have the first number was already in standard form, 1,101, and we're going to add that with the number that was in word form, which is 1,100,001. So that's what that number looks like. So when we add those numbers together, we get 2,100,102. Yes.
It doesn't ask you for that. It asks you for
the
answer in standard form and the answer in word form.
Correct. I wasn't finished yet. So this is standard form. That's the first part of the answer. So that's this part right here. And then the next part would be word form, which would look like 2 million. What did I say it was? 200,002? No.
100,000.
100,000. I erased it. I erased my answer, so that makes it hard for me. 100,000. 102. You wouldn't put and either, because when you write the word and in a number, you would put 2 there. You would put a comma there because you're separating the periods. So you have 2 million, that's in the millions period. 100,000 is in the thousands period. I'll take this one off and make it 102. That's the end. So that would be word form. So if you wrote that in standard form and then word form, that's what they were asking you to do. You can erase your board, and then we're going to look over at your notes. So keep your whiteboard though, because we're going to be using the whiteboards again in a few moments. So today we're on chapter 1, lesson 6. If you didn't write this already, place value through thousandths. Let me reset this one. There we go. There's the title of the lesson. I didn't have you write it when we first started, so I want to make sure you got the title. Chapter 1, lesson 6, place value through thousandths. Today, remember how last week when we first started decimals, I told you that we would be eventually putting numbers in the ones place. Today is the time where we're going to be putting numbers in the ones place. That doesn't really change what we're doing. It just adds a different way for us to write it. You don't need to have your math book open. If your math book is open, just close it. It's just going to confuse you and you're going to be looking at things that we haven't really talked about yet. All you need at the moment is your notes, your math notes. Once you have your math notes, open those. Make sure you're on the right, make sure you're not skipping around in your notebook, you're keeping them in order.
Do you write that?
Everything I write, you write. That's how you follow along and pay attention. Not, Malachi, where are you writing this? In your math notes. Are you writing it on a whiteboard? How could you ever keep it and look at it again if you wrote it on a whiteboard and then erased it? Follow along and pay attention. There's like 2 people who are just trying to write on their whiteboard still. Listen to what I'm saying. It's gonna help you. Trust me. We take notes every single day. Here is our first example. Here's our first example. Just write that number down. Then we're going to talk about how you would say that number if you were telling someone what that number was. We're also going to write that number in word form. And then I'm going to show you how you would write that number in expanded form. Because expanded form is the other thing that we did when we first learned about numbers. Remember, that was our very first lesson in this chapter. And now we're going to learn how to do expanded form when you have a decimal, because there's a way to do that too. Yes? Do you have a question? Okay. Okay, so here's how I would write this number. I would say it as 15 and 803 thousandths. So when you see the decimal point, you say the word and. So I'm going to use my notes to write a little, I'm going to draw an arrow, and I'm going to write the word and to my decimal point, just so that you don't forget that when you see the decimal, you say the word and, or you write the word and. So it would look like this, 15. So I'm going to read whatever number it is before the decimal. Then I'm going to have the word and. Then I'm going to read the number after the decimal, which is 803, isn't it? 803. And then I have to say what place I'm in. So what is that place value? The last digit in the number is a 3. What is the place value that's 3 spaces away from the decimal point? Nolan.
Thousand.
Thousandths with a TH.
Also, you don't have to use it.
It's on. It disappears. So the number is 15 and 803 thousandths. Now, when you're reading that number, sometimes people would say 803. Do you hear the difference? 803 and just 803. So if you put the word and in there, doesn't that make it a little bit confusing now that we're using the word and when we have a decimal point? So if you say 15 and 803 thousandths, you have and twice. There can only be one decimal in a number. And you want to make sure that if you're writing it, you have to write it correctly. So you would write, if you're saying 803, you can't have that and in there. Like sometimes we have that habit of saying and in the middle of a hundreds number like that. So 15 and 803 thousandths would be the word form of that number. Now, here's another part that's super important to be in your notes, and then I'm going to show you how to do it with this. It's going to look like a place value chart, which you are used to doing. But there's going to be something a little bit different because this is a reminder for you. So remember that this is the ones place. This number is the tenths place, and the tenths place is going to look like 1/10. The hundredths place is going to be 1 over 100. And the thousandths place will be 1 over 1,000. So while you're copying that down, I'm going to explain to you what that means. When we first started learning about decimals, I told you that as you go down a number, like from the tenths place to the hundredths place and the hundredths place to the thousandths place, the number gets smaller times 10. So it's smaller by 10. And so even though the number looks bigger, did you know that when you're working with fractions, as the denominator gets bigger, the number itself, the values actually get smaller? Because imagine 1/10 is like if you cut a pizza into 10 slices and you gave somebody 1. What if you cut that same size pizza into 1,000 slices and you gave somebody 1? They're going to get a much smaller piece of pizza, right? So when you're working with fractions, even though the numbers on the bottom actually get bigger, the value of the number gets smaller. Okay? So you have to remember that. So as you work down this way, it's by 10. So 10 times 10 is 100. 100 times 10 is 1,000. So it's getting smaller by tens. So here's how you would write that number. Everybody got this? Because the thing with the slides is as soon as I erase this, it's gone and then you can't see it anymore. So make sure you keep up with what I'm writing. Okay, so here was my number again. 15 and 803 thousandths. You've already written that. Here's how I would write it in expanded form. Remember we learned about expanded form? So I would write it like this. I would start at my first digit, which happens to be a 1. And I'm going to use these parentheses around it because there's going to be like a lot of fractions and a lot of numbers I want to keep separate. So since the first number is a 1 and it's in the tens place, not the 10th with a th, but that's in actually the tens place, right? Then I'm going to put 1 times 10. Then I'm going to add that with the next digit, which is a 5. And what place is the 5 in? What place? The ones place. So I'm going to do 5 times 1. Then I'm going to put an addition sign. You guys remember this from when we did expanded form, hopefully? Nod your head. You remember what we did? Okay, good. So we did this on expanded form. Now here's the new part, because this is the part of expanded form that we hadn't learned yet because we didn't use fractions when we did, or we didn't use decimals when we did that. So we're going to actually use fractions to represent each of those place values. This is an 8, and it's in the tenths place. We can't put a 10 because that would mean the tens place with an S, right? We're talking about the tenths place, which is a TH. So we have to represent that with the fraction that we just wrote. It's 8 times a tenth. 8 times a tenth would be 8 tenths, which is what the value of that number is. The value of this number right here is 8 tenths. And just like before, we skip the 0, so we don't have to worry about the 0, and then we go to the 3. So we're going to add 3 times, and we're going to make that a fraction. What's going to be the bottom of my fraction, Bryson? What would it be? What place is that?
Denominator.
What place is that? What denominator would I put there? What's the digit, the number that I'd put there? I thought I heard you say it. That's why I called on you.
10.
What place is the 3 in? Aiden, help him.
1. The place is in the 3 is in the 1, so it'll be 1 1,000.
That's in the thousands place, so you would say 1 over 1,000. When you look back at what we wrote there, remember when we drew the little dashes, and we wrote that the tenths place is 1/10, the hundredths place is 1/100th, and the thousandths place is 1,000th. So nod your head if you understand that. It's pretty much like what we did with expanded form before. The only difference is now we're working with parts that are decimal. And remember that a decimal and a fraction are really just two different ways of saying the same number. So you could, if you're talking about a piece of something, not the whole thing, you can use either a fraction to represent that, or you could use a decimal to represent that. And it's the same amount, but it's just a different way to write it. Okay, let's do another example. Make sure you guys got it. So let's do 6 and 14 hundredths. So this is standard form. If I wanted you to write it in word form, it would look like this: 6 and, remember the word and is where my decimal point is, and then I would just say the amount that's after it, which is 14. And then I say the place that it's in, which is hundredths. Now what I want you to do for a minute is try to see if you can use the example that we just did and figure out how you would write this number 6 and 1400ths with expanded form. Okay, so use the example. Of course it's different numbers, but you could look back and see, what did I do when the number was in the tenths place? What did I do with the number that was in the hundredths place? So look back and see what you think that would look like. Try it by yourself, and then I'll ask you to share with someone else, okay? So try that one by yourself. Okay, thank you for sharing your answer with your group. Here is what hopefully you have on your whiteboard. Or in your notes, sorry. I saw a whiteboard on someone's desk. It's in your notes. So hopefully here's what you have. You have 6. We're going to use parentheses, remember. That's the first digit that goes in the parentheses is the number that is there. It's the number. The digit is a 6. The second number is the place that it's in. So 6 is the number, 1s is the place. So I put a 1. Then I'm going to add the next number, which is a 1. And it's in the tenths place, which, if you look back into your notes, we said that the tenths place would show a value of 1/10. Then we're going to add the 4, which is in the hundredths place. So it would look like that. And that is the expanded form of 6 and 1400ths. Word form, expanded form. One more. Ready for one more? One more for your notes. I want you to do both by yourself this time. So last time, first one I helped you with both. The second one I helped you with one part. The third one, I'm going to let you do the whole thing. So I want you to do 2 parts. Word form, because the word form takes less time. Remember, because if you can read it, you can write it. So try the word form first, then try the expanded form. If you get stuck, I want you to whisper quietly to someone who's sitting around you and say, how did you do this part? But now we've done 2 examples in our notes, so those examples should be able to help you further into the rest of it, okay? So make sure that you're using your notes. You can also use your neighbor if you have a question. Check your answer with my answer up here. I wrote it in and then thought that I would let you just kind of look and see if that made sense, if that's what you got. So I have 11 and 923 thousandths. That's how you'd read that number. That's how you'd write that number. And then if I'm writing it in expanded form, I start with the 1, which is in the tens place. So it'd be 1 times 10 plus 1 times 1, because there's another 1 in the ones place. Then 9 times 1/10, because that's the tenths place. 2 times 100th, because that's the hundredths place. And then 3 times 1/1000th, because that's the thousandths place. Give yourself a yes like this, where you just go like this and you mouth the word yes if you got it right, like this. Yes, like that. Just quietly to show me that you got that one right. Good. See, there's your little celebratory yes without totally going nuts, so that's good. Okay, so we're going to erase this one. Now I want you to just look over onto your whiteboard, but you're not going to put your notes away, because your notes are going to be helpful to you. I'll wait for you to grab that whiteboard. Don't put your notes away. Let me tell you why your notes are helpful. We take notes in hopes that you can look back at them later and it will help you with your assignment. Now, your notes, the examples we do in our notes aren't necessarily the exact questions that you're going to do. Hold on to it. Hold on to it. We're going to use that. The examples that we did in our notes are not the exact questions you're going to come across, but you can always use what we did to help you. Look this way if you're ready. Here's the reason why I ask you not to put anything away, because then we have to wait in between. So you shouldn't have put away your notes. We already used whiteboards once. They should have been right there. I appreciate those of you who kept it right there in front of you. All you had to do was grab it and start writing on it, instead of putting things away, putting your pen away, and then having to find your pen again. Keep it all right there until we're all the way finished with math. Okay, here's what I want you to look at next. I'll make this bigger. Is this the one we already did? This is the one we already did. Well, that wouldn't be fair if I gave you one we already did. Let's try this. This one looks hard. I'm going to challenge you and see if you can get this one. here's what it says on your whiteboard. So on your whiteboard, write a real-world problem for a classmate that requires writing a number in standard form given the word form of a number. The number should have a value up to the hundredths place. So here's what they're asking you to do. I'm going to give you an example. You can't use mine though, okay? You can't use mine. You got to use your own. So here's my example. I'm not going to write it. I'm just going to tell you. We went to a baseball game, and at the baseball game, there were, they sold, let's say, 15 and 23 hundredths of the seats were sold or something like that. So that's a real word problem because I'm talking about the baseball, that it was at a baseball game. I was going to use a really big number, but then I realized that it said I had to use a decimal. So let's say that 15 and 23 hundredths of the seats were sold at the baseball game. Now the question says that the word form is the part that you tell them. So you don't write the numbers in digits like in standard form. You should write the number in word form. Maybe you want to make it even more simple and say, because you can make it money, and you can maybe say, I went to the store. This is a way better question. I went to the store and I spent $8 and 46 cents. That's a number into the hundredths place. 8 and 46 hundredths would be $8.46. But you'd have to write it out. So you have to write it out into words. Okay? So think of, this is on your whiteboard. You're going to write a question. It's like a word problem that someone else is going to solve. And in your question, you have to have a number that goes to the hundredths place. And you have to write it in word form. And then you're going to ask the person to write it in standard form. All right, I'll give you a minute. Okay, you can erase your whiteboard. And now we're going to look at our math pages, which your math book is in front of you. I will give you a second to tear those pages out. Our pages that you should have pulled out were 43 through 48. Here's the first example. It says that a decimal can be greater than 1. For an example, no, I'll put in a whole strip. Don't worry about it. For example, 1 and 5/10 is greater than 1 because there's a non-zero in the ones place. Here's what that means. I'm going to say it again without using these words. 1 and 5/10 is greater than 1 because you have the extra 5/10 there. And because you have that extra 5/10, that really is equal to like 1 1/2. 5/10 is half, so that would be 1 1/2. Okay, so when you have a number in the ones place, and then you have a decimal on the right-hand side of the decimal point, that shows you that the number is greater than 1. It's not just equal to 1, but it's equal to more than 1. So here's our first example. 5 tree taps produce enough maple sap to make 1 gallon, or about 3 79/100 liters of syrup. Read and write the number of liters in word form. So we're going to write the number into the place value chart. It's 3 79/100. The place value of the last digit, 9, is what? What is the place value of the last digit? What is it, Ava? Hundredths. So that's what we're writing in the blank here. They ask for the place value. Use the word and for the decimal point. We talked about that part in our notes. So the word form would be 3. We're only having to fill in a little bit of the blanks here. It has some of it written for us. And 79/100. So you would kind of, when you're trying to read these numbers, think about it like treating before the decimal as its own number. Like if you're getting confused on reading it, like the number before the decimal is just 3. So you would just say 3. Then when you get to the decimal, you say and then the number after the decimal is 79, so you would say 79. And then because it's in the hundredths place, that's how you know you write the word hundredths. Let's look at the next page. Example number 2. It says circle the digit that's in the thousandths place and then write the value of the digit. So what digit's in the thousandths place? The number is 247 thousandths. Raise your hand if you know what which digit is in the thousandths place. Angelina.
7.
7. So we're going to circle the number 7. So how many places to the right is the number 7? Hazma?
2.
Well, 3. It's one more. Remember, 2 is hundredths, 3 is thousandths. So it's 3 places to the right of the decimal place, and we circled that digit already. And so what is the value of that 7? What's the value? How much is it worth? Nolan?
7 1,000ths.
You could just say 7 thousandths, but yes, 7.
Yeah, but like.
Yeah, if you did it this way,
Tricky sounding, like 7,000ths.
you're thinking of that. So it would be 7 thousandths. Just 7 thousandths.
Like, it just sounds weird. when you
Yes.
say 7,000.
So you basically take what the number is, what the digit is, and then you add the place value to the end, and that tells you the value. Okay, let's look at the last slide I have for you here. Example number 3. It's on your paper on the back of that first page. So you're going to write this number. So this time, they've given it to you in word form, and you have to write it in standard form. So they're saying, write this number. 5 and 614 thousandths. Well, if I get confused, I can look and find the word and, because that's where I know the decimal point's going to be. So all the words before the word and is going to be also before the decimal point. All the words after the word and are going to be after the decimal point. So this number would be 5 and, there's my decimal point, 614 thousandths. Just pull out the next one. It's okay. This one I can actually take from you so that you're not confused. That way it wasn't the same thing, huh?
I got confused.
Yeah, that's okay. Here, hold on. I think you actually have some of them here. There they are. Take those. Just pull it there. These you don't need. So the 5 is in the ones place.
What? I thought it was in thousands.
The 5,
Yeah.
that's the ones place. The space right before the decimal is always the ones place.
That's weird.
That's the way it is. The one, and then if there was a number before the 5, that would be the tens place. Like you're going backwards into what we learned the first lesson. And then the 6 is the tenths place. And you can see what they're doing down here is they're showing you how you would write it if you were writing expanded form. And the 1 is in the hundredths place. And then the 4 is the thousandths. So you could see that you had 3 examples here, and all 3 were a little bit different. Sometimes they asked you for the standard form like they did here. Sometimes they're going to ask you for the word form, and sometimes they're going to ask you for expanded form. They could be asking you to do any of those things that we learned today. So it's very important that you read the directions, because not all of them have these little lines and dots and things like partially filled in for you, so you have to look really carefully to see what they want you to do. So we're going to do the guided practice for a couple of minutes, and then I'm going to let you get started on the assignment. So guided practice is numbers 1 through 5. So I'm going to give you a couple minutes for that. As soon as you're done with these and you've checked your answers with the people around you, you may start the independent practice. Okay? Now today, your time starts right now because otherwise we'll be late for recess. This lesson took us a little bit longer. So your 20 minutes starts right now. So make sure that you're using all the minutes that I'm giving you to work with those around you. So once you've talked about the guided practice, you may get started on the independent practice.